right, I would like to welcome everybody to this evening's town board meeting in the town of Amherst, Tuesday, June 20th, 2023. We're going to begin this evening with an invocation by Councilmember Zuccalla.
Hello, everyone. Just this past weekend, we all had an opportunity to celebrate Father's Day. Grateful for fathers and father figures in our lives. Traditionally, fathers bring to the table to their children an education and an example in kindness, compassion, good sportsmanship, integrity, mutual respect, and responsibility. And I thought we'd use this moment right now to reflect on those traits and the father figures in our lives.
Okay, thank you. And with that, I would ask everybody to please rise for a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So we're on a Tuesday this evening in recognition of the Juneteenth holiday. We're proud that this town board was an early adopter of the holiday, and it's been something that's been special to us for a while now. We remember our unity whenever we offer a Pledge of Allegiance, but I also want to thank our Diversity Commission, who last week held our annual Juneteenth dinner at the Senior Center, and yes. Council and Deputy Supervisor Buckeye give you a chance to comment on that if you'd like.
Oh, thank you, Supervisor. We had a lovely event. We had 175 people in attendance. Our speaker was the Reverend Mark Blue, who's president of the local NAACP. He was very inspiring, very comical, and very engaging, and it was a wonderful evening. Our county executive was able to attend, along with our senior services, Erie County Commissioner Marinucci, and I think it was just a good educational experience for people to hear about what the holiday entailed, how it came to be, and how we can celebrate it going forward. So it was a very nice evening, and I thank the town for their support. The Senior Center with Melissa Abel, Mary Dinah Pooley from Youth and Recreation Services. We had volunteer servers from Youth Engaged in Service, also from, I believe, some of the Citizens Police Academy or people in training were also our servers. It was a very nice event, and we were happy to be able to contribute that toward that holiday on behalf of the town. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Deputy Supervisor. With that, I would ask our town clerk to please call the roll.
Supervisor Copa.
Here.
Deputy Supervisor Buckeye.
Here.
Councilmember Berger.
Here.
Councilmember Lavin.
Present.
And Councilmember Zuccalla.
Here. All right, next item on our agenda is approval of minutes from Monday, June 5th, 2023. A motion to adopt those as they appeared in our agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. We have a couple of public hearings this evening. The first is Resolution 528, public hearing on the 3945 Wrench Road proposed rezoning. A motion to open the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Good evening, Supervisor Copeland, members of the town board. Sean Hopkins on behalf of the applicant, Wrench Group LLC. We're here this evening with what we believe is a relatively straightforward rezoning of property located at 3945 Wrench Road from R4 to CTR5. Just to acclimate everyone, on the right-hand side of the diagram, you can see Sweet Home Road in close proximity to the UB North Campus. Wrench Road connects up to Sweet Home Road and then terminates directly to the south of the photograph we've shown there. As I indicated, the current zoning of this site is R4. There is absolutely no parcels in the immediate vicinity that share that same zoning classification. The predominant zoning classifications in that vicinity are much more intensive and include general business, research and development, MFR 6, MFR 5. What we're doing here is trying to take advantage of one of the town's new mixed-use district, particularly in this particular area, CTR 5. Here's a copy of the concept plan. It's important to note that obviously If and when you approve the requested rezoning, then the hard work begins. We have to file a site plan application with the planning department, and it will be subject to a future hearing by the planning board. What we're showing conceptually at this point is a 3-story multifamily building consisting of 12 units. You can see there's a deliberate effort to concentrate the parking spaces behind the site. And one of the key benefits of the requested zoning versus existing zoning is it will require review and a recommendation from the town's design advisory board, meaning there'll be a focus on architecture, green space, amenities, et cetera, et cetera. It's a copy of the conceptual elevation plan prepared by Sutton Architecture. You can still see it does feature diverse materials, vertical and horizontal relief, a residential style roof. And clear as day, this building will actually be much less tall and less intensive than the predominant character in that immediate vicinity. The Planning Board did hold a public hearing in connection with this request during its meeting on April 20th and adopted a resolution by unanimous vote recommending both the issuance of a negative declaration pursuant to the State Environmental Quality Review Act and the requested rezoning of the project site from R4 to DC5. The Planning Board made some detailed findings that specifically held that this is consistent with the recommendations of the adopted bicentennial comprehensive plan. I do want to note that if you look at figure 6A, which pertains to the appropriate locations in the town for the town's relatively recently created mixed-use districts, we fall right in that red area here, which is designated as suburban center, and the CTR 5 zoning classification that we're seeking is consistent with that designation. Suburban centers are specifically described in detail on pages 38, pages 338, and 339 of the adopted comprehensive plan. I also want to note it is consistent with figure 6 of the comprehensive plan as well that designates the site as appropriate for medium residential. Finally, this is subject to the State Environmental Quality Review Act. It's on enlisted action. We did submit a completed Part 1 of the full environmental assessment form. As I indicated, the Planning Board did recommend the issuance of a negative declaration. We have provided a geotechnical report with detailed recommendations for foundation designs as prepared by Glynn Geotechnical Engineering, dated August 24th of 2022. And then in the future, we will be submitted fully engineered plans, a SWIP, an engineer's report, et cetera, et cetera. So all we'd ask this evening is that you close the public hearing and schedule a decision date on the request to amend the zoning classification of the project site from R4 to CTR 5. And of course, I would welcome the opportunity to address any questions that any of you may have. Thank you.
All right, first questions from this board. Yep, Deputy Supervisor.
I just had a question about the poorly drained land. It's Churchville Silt Loam. It says it's 100% poorly drained.
Right.
So what measures will you take to compensate and to account for that variable?
Right, so the soils do meet the classification for poorly drained soils per the Erie County Soil Survey. We're well aware of that fact. That's one of the reasons the town requires a geotechnical report so early in the review process. And while I won't bore you with the specific details of the 45-page report, it does contain very specific recommendations for how the foundation should be designed. And rest assured, your building department that has ample technical expertise will ensure we're compliant with those recommendations. It is important to note in this instance, the building will not include any basement or subsurface parking.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I should have pointed this out at the beginning. I failed to. The town board typically does not take action on a rezoning request the first evening of the public hearing. Sounds like in your statement that you're prepared for that issue.
Right. We acknowledge that's your typical policy.
Okay. There are further questions from the town board? I guess the only question I would have is, obviously with CTR 5, there's connectivity requirements to adjacent parcels. I'm not sure if you could go back to your site plan for a minute. Your site plan only stays on your site. It doesn't.
No, it
venture
actually, so Ellicott Development is obviously one of the more prominent developers in that immediate vicinity. And as you can see, we're actually showing shared access with the project directly to the south on the same side of Wrench Road. Okay. We're not showing currently shared access with the Center for Inquiry, but we're also sharing access with the parcel directly to the west, which fronts on Sweet Home Road, which I believe is owned by Bevel Aqua Development and is a medical office building. So we will make an effort to provide the connectivity encouraged by the town's mixed-use districts.
Got it. All right, further, sure.
Do you have an idea what the rents might be?
No, not at this point in time. All I can tell you is obviously with construction costs escalating, rents are tough right now.
Comments or questions from the audience on this rezoning? See none, I'm going to motion to close public hearing. And
Second.
I was going to add and set a decision date for our next town board meeting.
That is 3,
3 o'clock meeting, though,
Yeah, what's the next meeting? Is that-
July
Well-
24th.
Yeah, so I'll set it for July 24th. Is that okay? All right, so, so there's a motion and a second to close the public hearing, set a decision date of July 24th. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. The next item on the agenda is Resolution 529. It's a public hearing on 2350, 2316, 2372 Sweet Home Road. The original public hearing was noticed for a rezoning and a request to amend declaration of restrictions. We did receive correspondence today from the property owner or developer through Mr. Hopkins that they had asked to withdraw the public hearing or withdraw the rezoning request and only hear the public hearing on the request to amend the declaration of restrictions. So just to be clear, I'm going to restate, this is a resolution 529. It's a public hearing for 2350, 2360 to 2372 on a request to amend declaration of restrictions. And I'll motion to open the public hearing at this time.
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Did I get that all right?
You did.
Okay.
Good evening once again. Sean Hopkins on behalf of the applicant, Essex Homes of West New York, Inc. Also with me is Kevin Curry. As the supervisor indicated in his introductory comments, this originally involved 2 separate land use applications. We have withdrawn the previously filed request to amend the zoning classification of 0.17 acres of the project site from OB to MFR5. And there is a letter that's been submitted confirming that. So the project site itself is located at 2350 and 2360 through 2372 Sweet Home Road. Pursuant to previous decisions issued by this board, it's currently zoned both MFR5 and OB. This particular site does have a very lengthy history going all the way back to the original developer, Roy Jordan of North Forest Development, who previously had this entire site approved for an office park. At that point in time, substantial clearing was done. Turned out he did not need to move forward with the future phases. And then subsequently, the predecessor from Essex Homes came in and sought and obtained 2 separate rezoning applications, one for the main site, 2350, and then secondly, as you'll recall, we later added the Average Joe's Bar that was formerly at 2360 Sweet Home Road. The copy of the approved site plan, Essex Homes of Western New York ultimately purchased the project from the predecessor development, RIS Development LLC. The site itself is nearly 12 acres in size. The approved site plan for this project shows a total of 48 upscale residential units. There's 14 separate buildings. They're comprised of 2, 3, and 4 bedroom units, or 2, 3, and 4 unit buildings. The actual density of this overall project is barely more than what would be permitted in the town's R3 zoning district. We're at 4 units per acre. The price that we're generally receiving per unit at this point in time, again, construction costs have been difficult to deal with, is approximately $500,000 per unit, and 5.25 acres of this site, or 43.8%, which is highlighted in green, is protected as permanent open space and will remain undeveloped. In connection with your decisions previously, including the decision issued on March 19th of 2018, you imposed a series of conditions. Ultimately, all of those conditions found their way into a declaration of restrictions that was recorded at the Erie County Clerk's Office. And not only are we withdrawing the request to rezone a portion of the site, we're actually modifying our request to amend the declaration of restrictions to deal with only one topic only, which I'll show you in a second. It is important to note that in connection with the approved site plan process, we are showing a 6-foot fence along the western boundary, southern boundary, and then extending down close to North Ellicott Creek Road. That has a distance of 1,150 linear feet. And then there is some additional permit open space that's actually to the south of the fence behind two of the adjoining property owners on North Ellicott Creek Road. These are just some photographs of the exterior of the buildings. Of course, that's a 3-unit building, and then one of the kitchens of the units. These units have been particularly well received, with only a couple of comments of relevance. The first comment we've received again and again that we're not going to address in detail this evening is there has been very substantial demand for single-story sunrooms on the rear of these units. That's largely attributable to the COVID-19 pandemic. We're going to try and satisfy that demand for now without a need to rezone any portion of the site or amend the relevant zoning conditions. But I do want to note it wasn't a decision that was made likely, or it wasn't made lightly in light of the project history, but this is what we were seeking to rezone, literally only 8 feet of the project site. And that was to accommodate 3 different options: patios, covered porches, or sunrooms on the rear of those units. It is important to note the sunroom located behind a fence would have had a mean roof height of 12 feet 1 inches. We are providing those on the interior of the site, and we're hoping that what we have is certainly adequate for now. But again, we'll reevaluate that based on continued construction and market conditions as we move forward. So we're here with only one request, and that request is to amend condition number 4 that was contained in the Declaration of Restrictions recorded at the Erie County Clerk's Office on February 21st of 2019. That request is to allow second-story windows on the rear loft space of 7 of the middle units on the interior buildings, which I'll show you in a second. It is important to keep in mind where the adjoining property owners are. We have a series of homeowners located along North Ellicott Creek Road, some of whom are here this evening. And I do want to note this project has been discussed very extensively with them over the course of the past several years. Here's a copy of the current site plan. So the buildings in the red are the exterior buildings. Those were the ones where the relevant request to rezone a portion of the site and amend one of the other conditions previously pertained. We're focusing this evening on the interior buildings, buildings number 4, 5, 6, and 8, which are shown here, or actually not on those, 3, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. Buildings number 4, 5, 6, and 8, the exterior buildings here, we are not proposing to modify the condition to allow windows in the second-story loft space in the back of the buildings. Only 7 of the 48 units on those middle buildings, which you can see a tiny window on the back of the loft space. It's important to note that we think because we've so severely limited this request based on the input received, we don't think there's any adverse impacts associated with it. In fact, I don't believe any of the neighbors, based on full build out of the site, will have direct views of the rears of the second story of these units. This is the proposal in terms of amending the condition. Basically, we're proposing to amend condition number 4 to allow second story loft windows only in those interior buildings. They will not be permitted in buildings 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 14, which if you follow along, wrap around here. It is important this is subject to seeker. Obviously, we don't believe there's any potentially significant adverse environmental impacts, no wetland impacts, no impacts on cultural resources. Both this board and the planning board have previously issued negative declarations pursuant to the State Environmental Quality Review Act. So all we're asking this evening is that you would close the public hearing on that limited request to amend condition number 4 previously imposed by this board. And of course, as always, either myself or Mr. Curry would welcome the opportunity to address any questions that any of you may have.
Okay. Questions from this board?
I have a question.
Sure, Councilman.
I did happen to watch on the internet the planning board meeting from April where this was discussed about windows and such. So you said a tiny window. The window at the back of the loft space, is it a smaller window that just like pushes out? Or is it what kind of a window would that be?
I'm going to let Kevin Curry, who's very familiar with construction on the site, address the size of the windows. So Kevin,
Okay,
you wanna come up?
thank you.
Thank you. I'm Kevin Curry from Essex Homes. No, the window on the, that we're referring to is what I would term an average size window for a bedroom. It's two mulled windows, 4 foot by 5 foot. And as you can see, the distance to any of the neighbors' homes is very substantial and certainly well into the hundreds of feet, and surrounded by the red homes. So they're really only looking upon themselves. It's an average-sized bedroom window.
So is it like one unit or is it two like
It is
that put together?
Two windows mulled together. They're double hungs.
Together.
So a double hung has an upper sash and a lower sash,
Uh-huh,
and there's
okay.
two of those mulled together.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And it's important to note, and it's highlighted here, those are limited to only the interior units in those buildings. It's a 3-unit building, 3-unit building, 4-unit building, 3-unit building. So it literally only pertains to 7 of the 48 units. It's important to note that in connection with the planning board meeting, one of the nearby residents who I wasn't familiar with on North Ellicott Creek Road, who lives a considerable distance, indicated that at least during winter months, she could see the rear of one of these buildings. It's important to note that as we build this out, these actual buildings around the perimeter are clearly going to block any view shed to the second-story loft windows in the rear of those particular 7 units. It reflects a very deliberate effort. Again, there will be no second-story units on the rear portion of the loft space for any of the buildings on either the western or southern perimeter of the project site.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. There are comments or questions from the audience this evening. Please come forward. I'm going to ask you to come to the microphone and state your name and address for the record.
Hi. Good evening. My name is Joan Stone, and I reside at 550 North Ellicott Creek Road, and our property is adjacent to the entire western border of the project. So those two long red buildings, that's our property, just to the west of that. I'm here tonight as a concerned citizen regarding the privacy of us and our surrounding property owners. We have negotiated in good faith in the past many years, as Sean said, to assure us that there would be no windows on the rear side, second story of any of the buildings in this project. We're here today to defend what we fought for when they made these plans 4 years ago. This alone is disappointing since it is written in a declaration not to have the windows. As the project has progressed, we noticed a window in the back of one of the units on the second story. So they had built the building with the window in it. And then a second building was being built, and guess what? There was also a window on the back side of the second story. We got together as a group and reported this to the town and brought it to the attention of Essex Woods. When we brought it to the attention of Essex Woods, he said it was a mistake, and they were very shocked that these windows just were built into the buildings. This was a real problem for us, and it's very difficult for the neighbors to trust and to believe that this was a mistake, and they weren't planned to be built into the building. This did install a huge trust issue between the homeowners and us Essex Homes. So for the record, we are opposed to any windows on the back side of the second-story buildings, even the interior buildings. Thank you.
Can I ask one clarifying question? Ma'am? Could I ask one clarifying question?
Yes.
So you said you live to the west of the two red buildings?
Yes, correct.
So how would the interior windows of the buildings that Mr. Hopkins is describing affect you any more than the front-facing windows from the same buildings?
They're very high.
But isn't there a roof line?
We could see them now. I mean, we can see them from my property now, that the windows that they put in, and
I'm just looking at it, wondering how one roof doesn't block the other roof. I mean, you've got two buildings in parallel, right? So wouldn't the
Correct.
building to the west of the building, so you get two windows facing each other, wouldn't that block or screen?
I don't know, because they're not there right now. Those buildings aren't there, so that's hard to say. We know what we can see now and what has been built. And they are very high. I don't know how high the buildings are.
I'm just saying, if building 9 and 10 are the same height, then wouldn't building 9 block the window from building 10 and negate the whole issue? Okay, I that's fine.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay,
It's a good point, but I'm just saying what I can see now.
I got it.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name's Chris Stone. I also live at 550 North Ellicott, which is actually the stripe of tan between the words and the green line there, all the way back. I'm here also to say that I guess my point's a little bit different. We had talked about this in the past, and we don't want windows in the back of the buildings. I'm really glad to hear that they withdrew their request to rezone. That was another problem that we were having. And I think it's all based on the trust that we have with what's going on here. The amount of time we spent putting this together, making sure that we were happy, the developer was happy, it took a long time. And I think we don't want windows in the back. Okay, that's what we fought for since day one. It was important enough in the beginning to put it into a declaration that everybody agreed on. My problem is, what do we have to stand on to stop this from happening further? Let's say we get a negative decision tonight.
Well, we don't make a decision
Okay,
on land
well,
use
let's just
tonight.
say we
Okay.
get a negative decision on our part for this request. Next year, what's to stop us from coming in here and having to fight for, building 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8? Right? A declaration, I'm not a lawyer, so I can't say this, but what does a declaration mean if it doesn't have any teeth? Like, what, as a citizen, are we supposed to do to make sure that we don't have to come here every couple years and fight for the next round of changes? That's where I'm having a problem. I know I'm probably not going to get any answers, but that's what I'm looking at. So if we allow this to go on, it's going to continue to go on, in my opinion. So we're saying no windows, period, so that we don't start the ball rolling. Thank you.
Can I ask you a question? Mr. Stone, can I ask you a question? So can you clarify, we have a lot of these meetings regularly, so
Right.
this is 5 years ago.
Yeah.
What's the point of content, what's the issue with the windows? Why is that something that your members of your community fought against?
These buildings they're relatively high, and there's nothing to stop people. We want our privacy. All the neighbors, you can see right around the bottom and the side here. We don't want the exposure for those people sitting up on the second story to be able to look into our yards. And I'm not saying there's going to be peeping toms and stuff, but realistically, it's all woods back there, and it has been, and low office buildings. And to change it into something like this, it just doesn't seem like it's not necessary. We do know that at the time, the declarations were put in place, nobody seemed to be too worried about it. And I think the units were selling for 385 to 400, and now we're looking at, wait a minute, we can sell them for 500 if we, put a dormer up top and a window in there, and then we also know that they're looking to do, well, this is getting off topic, but the patio rooms and all. That's all fine and dandy, but we want to know how we stop this from happening again, I guess, is what I'm looking at.
So I'm just gonna kind of offer a quick perspective here. So this currently the property's held by Essex Homes.
Yep.
And they're in the process of building these and then selling them to the private sector.
Right?
And at some point, Essex Homes won't own anything here.
Correct.
And 20 years from now, some property owner could say, hey, I'd like to put an addition on my townhome, or I'd like to put a sunroom on my townhome. That property owner might end up right here with the same petition. The reality is, can't completely stop change, right? And so the initial project is what it is here. And I think what you're trying to say is, look, we don't want to end up back here with Essex on another one of these points. Whether these windows actually affect you or not, the ones that we're talking about with the green circles, right? And so that's what I'm hearing is we don't want to retreat on one thing and then have to be back here defending every other point.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
So, just to reiterate that, is it when these things sell and they're now owned by everybody else, it's a small private development in there.
It's separate property owners who have the right to petition just like everybody else.
Okay. All right.
Just like you could say, I want to do something on my house that needs a zoning variance and I want to go before the zoning board, or I want to do something on my house that requires some other amenity, and so you want to come forward.
Right.
And they'll be separately owned parcels. And I just want to make sure that the expectation here isn't that Essex safeguards these things forever. However, what you're saying is through this process of build out, we don't want to have to fight continuously.
Sure. I'd rather take my chances and not allow them to happen now and have the one guy in the corner pull it out, 10 years from now.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Jim Bartley, 574 North Ellicott Creek Road. Can I approach? I have some pictures. I don't have fancy stuff to show you guys.
Yeah, but we can't project during this. Sure.
So our backyard is about 240 feet of direct exposure to the development. Right now, we have 35 feet of deciduous brush between the properties, the deed restricted area. So for 6 months out of the year, they got a clear shot as it looks right now into a yard. I can't tell you honestly what's going to happen when they put the back buildings up, but right now they got a clear shot. We have a lot of glass in the back of our house. So yeah, they can see right in. 6 months of the year we got plenty of leaves, but there's no evergreens in this area at all, so it's just pretty much brush for the winter. So if you look closely at the pictures, you'll see the two dormers that they put in, the illegal windows that they put in, that we had the building department tell them to take out. And you can see where those dormers are. If we can see them, they can see us. It's as simple as that, okay? And my fear is the same thing that Mr. Stone just said, that, if you give them the interior windows, that, that's an old point. So I guess you have to ask the question, why do we need these second-story windows in the back? And the answer is they want to make all these units 3 bedrooms, and they need on the interior rooms, okay, they got exterior rooms that can use they can put windows on the sides to get the 3 bedrooms, but on the interior rooms, they have to put the windows in the back. So it really comes to a question of, should these all be 3 bedrooms? That's what they're really after, and that's why they need the window in the middle. So I guess you got to ask the question, and I know Sean Hopkins is going to tell you all the stuff about, the property is, density and all this stuff, But if all the units are 3 bedrooms, can we accommodate the number of cars that are going to go in this property, okay? You look at the frontage, you look at the back, and you can see the fronts are like 10 by 10 or 12 by 12, okay? There's like virtually no yards in these, okay? Same thing with the backyard. So you're not going to raise a young family there. So the people that live there are going to be older, okay? They're going to be adults. And more than likely, the people that are going to be in these bedrooms are also going to be adults. With adults comes cars, okay? So if you got the ability to take 6 adults and put them in one unit, you also have the ability to have 6 cars per unit, okay? If you look at the pictures that are circulating around, you'll see that the garage is very small. You can fit maybe 2 mid-sized cars in it. The driveway is extremely short. There's mid-sized cars in these drawings or these pictures, and the one is actually blocking the mailbox because it's such a short driveway. There's not enough area to park a car between your driveway and your neighbor's driveway without blocking somebody's driveway. So basically, where are we going to put all these cars, okay? You need to have parking for 240 to 250 residential cars that live there, and then another 100 of cars and trucks for people who are visiting. I mean, you get all these different circumstances where people are going to come there to visit, whether it's a Super Bowl party or the Bills are playing, or it's come and meet after church, or Friday night come back to the house and have some drinks or something. Where are these people going to park? They need a parking lot that's going to accommodate like another 100 cars, you know? How is the garbage going to get picked up? How is the mail going to get picked up? How is an emergency vehicle going to get around? The fire, I'm telling you right now, if they're parking on both sides, a fire truck cannot make those turns. It cannot make those turns. I mean, you're welcome to go out and look at the site, you know? But, so what I'm saying is, if they're going to insist on having these 3 bedrooms in every single unit, then they got to put a parking lot in. It's as simple as that. I mean, I don't live there. I don't really care. I just don't want the windows in the back. Okay? You get where I'm coming from?
I understand. I don't want to convolute the amount of vehicle parking with the straightforward question of windows, which is a privacy
Well,
issue.
it's kind of.
But there's a lot of other scenarios that would play out once the spaces were overparked, and we would end up down a rabbit hole of dealing with traffic and safety issues and dealing with site plan approval issues. So, the question is, yes, what they show on the plans is clearly an articulated 3rd bedroom, a small 3rd bedroom. And if we can accept the fact that the main resident's objections is to privacy, if there's a secondary concern about cars and saturation of the site, that becomes a traffic and safety issue. So, I just want to make sure we're keeping the 2 elements. Yeah,
Well, I mean,
I
what do you
understand
do
your
if you
connection.
build out the whole place in 3 bedrooms and then you find out that you have major issues? What do you do then? Tear down a couple buildings or what?
They'd be limited as to how they could park vehicles in there anyways, so.
You can see
Excuse me,
pictures that
can
I
I-
gave you that you cannot fit a car between driveway and
I
driveway.
get it. I'm saying is if we're going to that pathology, there's a lot of other restrictions that come into play, not just the question, right? So if the zoning accommodated it and the site plan approval dealt with vehicle access already, those are a different issue from a building facade and light issue. So I understand what you're saying. I just want to make sure we're keeping the
It doesn't look
buckets
like it's
together.
going in our favor, but thank you for your time. I appreciate that.
Don't know that it isn't, right? You've already got a petitioner who's come in and made some very large concessions just heading into tonight, and the board adopted the policies back in 19, mostly the same board. So I don't know that there is a question on the board as to whether or not we want to relax those policies. Just because it ends up on an agenda doesn't mean that we're endorsing it. So
I just want to point out that we were vigorously fighting for a year and a half to stop the student housing project, okay? And when we found out that these were going to be owner-occupied, we were thrilled, okay? We were very happy. Well, all we wanted is our declarations to be followed. That's how simple as that.
Understood. Thank you. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Anthony Chungben. I own property 620, which is below number 4, and I live across the street from that at 645 North Ellicott Creek. I just wanted to reiterate what Chris and they said about the coming back for rezoning. So they requested for rezoning. We had all these declarations. They wanted something from us. They finally put in the drainage this year. It's been 3 years. They've been putting drainage with the buildings were coming in and our land was flooding. And they finally decided to put the drainage in at the beginning of this year. So if they wanted something, they came to us because they wanted to make the change. But that was in the site plan to put those drainage in. They do not have the drainage on the west side of the property now. So that's the Stones property on the west side. That still has a water problem there too. So they wanted something, they put the drain in to try to get our concession. So I just wanted to reiterate, we're just against the things that were, as Sean said earlier today, that depending on the market and stuff like that, they may come back and ask for the rezoning on the back side again. So I'm just
Okay.
don't want to come back. We fought for 1.5 years. We did a lot of things we made a lot of concessions. They made a lot of concessions. This is what we got to, and so I just wanted to say, I don't want to come back. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, anything further? All right, so seeing none, I'm going to, so I have a question, which is the seeker associated with this, the negative deck associated with this, assumed the rezoning and it assumed that all of the restriction changes were made, correct? With tonight's action, the proposed action, all right, so.
Before you do that, can't we have the petitioner respond?
I want to clarify how the seeker is going to work on this, because if we say we're going to vote on this on the 24th, my issue is the public hearing still has to be open. We can't close it because the seeker needs to be modified to reflect the changes the petitioners asked for. So that's all. Before Sean started to speak, I was going to say, I got a public hearing.
Defer to you on this. I mean, we're reducing the impacts, of course.
Understood. Okay, so that said,
I might have another question. So I just have,
Deputy
just a
Supervisor.
clarification.
Sure.
You said, Mr. Hopkins, that you're looking now at number 4. So is that the only thing that you want to modify?
Yes.
Because in these papers, you recited all of the,
Right.
restrictions from 2019 and so on that were filed. And then you had a proposal of what you wanted now, but that does not apply. It's just the alteration to number 4.
Right. So
That's it?
Right. So if you look at the declaration of restrictions, the application to amend that correlated with the rezoning, it contains some modifications to some of the other conditions pertaining to setbacks, rear side covered porches, and sunrooms, et cetera, et cetera. We've eliminated all of that for now. The only request that's in front of you this evening is condition number 4, and again, limited to those 7 units on the interior buildings, behind green space, behind fence, and behind buildings.
Okay,
And I do
that's
want to note that all of the neighbors that have spoken this evening have now known for several years. They've always been forthright. We've always had good discussions. I do acknowledge their frustration after coming to probably a dozen meetings 5 years ago that we're back. Unfortunate for us, the world changed a lot. Some of that's related to COVID-19 pandemic, and some of that's related to changes in how people work subsequent to the COVID-19 pandemic. Unfortunately, or fortunately, we've just found that there's a demand for, number 1, single-story sunrooms and covered porches on the rear of the units. We didn't anticipate that back in 2018. And secondly, the second-story loft space with the window in the rear. I do want to note the sole purpose of that is, generally speaking, as Mr. Bartlett indicated, the predominant owners of these units are seniors, people that already live in the town of Amherst. They're selling their house. They want a single-story footprint. Generally speaking, that second-story loft space is guest space, meaning children, grandchildren come home for the holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas, summer break. That's where they stay. It's not to squeeze more people into these units. Generally speaking, in these types of projects, you'll find few or any school-age children. So I just want to make sure that's clear. It's literally to provide guest room that will have a window in the rear to make it nice. It's really that straightforward. And we have limited the request on purpose, so it's not causing any direct views to the adjoining properties. I do think Kevin Curry wants to address, because one, how we got off a level of having trust on this project, or maybe some miscommunication, is there was a mistake made by both the building department and also a little bit by the applicant in terms of installing some rear side windows. So I want Kevin to address that. The minute we became aware of it, we proactively addressed it, but I think that's where we went a little bit off the track in terms of the discussions. We've been working diligently, including holding an informational meeting back in January, to try and get this back on track in terms of trust and open communication. We'll continue to make that effort, but I think, Kevin, you'd like to at least address that aspect of the project. It is important to note that Kevin was not involved in the original review process. So with that being said.
Thank you. I do want to address two things. One, with regard to the windows in the rear of the units. When building permits were submitted for Building 12 and Building 13, they included windows on the rear of those units. A great amount of time, or good amount of time had passed, and that restriction had been missed both by our designer as well as by the building department. Windows went in. As soon as that was pointed out to us, we immediately took them out of Building 13. As Building 12 was being framed, a window was cut in for a day or two because it was on the plans, and that was immediately, I didn't leave the site until that was removed because it was very important to us. That's why then we called a meeting with the neighbors to express our intentions. We had a number of other intentions beyond what we're discussing today. From discussions with the neighbors, we immediately removed several of those and removed others, to the point where our sole request this evening is the windows on the rear of the property of the buildings, on the interior only. We had wanted to add them on all the buildings. We were told by the neighbors, no, no, don't consider that, so we dropped that request immediately. As the supervisor aptly pointed out, whether windows on the front of the building or the back of the building, now the windows on the rears face one another and they don't face outward to the site. So it's very important to us as a builder. We've been in business 30 years, high integrity. We acknowledge the mistake made with regard to those rear windows that were removed, and we also would hope that our intentions of only providing them on the interior buildings are acknowledged. Secondly, the discussion of the drainage in Phase 2 was brought up, and although Phase 2 is not yet constructed, when it was brought up to us, we immediately installed the drainage in the dead of winter, and it's been very successful for us. And thank you very much for your time and consideration.
Okay.
I got another question.
Sure, Deputy Supervisor.
Sorry, just a clarification, so looking through the papers. So when you say number 4, I'm going to read what I think that you're referring to and just tell me if this is really correct. The residential buildings to be constructed on the project site shall be limited to single-story residential units with second-story loft space. Second-story windows are not permitted on the rear side of second-story loft space in buildings number 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 as depicted on a site plan prepared by Carmina Wood Morris dated December 16, 2022. Is that the correct?
Right, except we've even further limited that. So this is the actual language right in the PowerPoint presentation that mirrors with the presentation. So we're saying we can't have second-story windows on the loft space on the rear of buildings 1, 2, 14, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So it's 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 14. So we further restricted that request.
Not permitted.
So I think that so by subtraction, there's a lot happening on tonight's agenda, right?
There is.
There's a resolution that needs to be amended that was posted one way. There's a seeker that needs to be reevaluated based on the resolution that's posted. There was a protest petition based on rezoning, which is the trigger for a protest petition, which would seem to be null and void because the rezoning's no longer a portion of this. Right. And there's a planning board recommendation based on the original resolution request.
Right.
So there's a lot more to clean up here than we were going to clean up for this evening. So my intent is I'm going to motion to adjourn the public hearing. I'm not going to set a decision date, but I'm going to adjourn the public hearing with an expectation of reopening it on the 24th of July.
Okay.
Okay? All right. That's my motion.
I'm confused.
We have to,
But why are
not-
we
it's not what's
adjourning?
here.
I know, why are we adjourning it and not just leaving it open? That's what I'm asking.
well, the adjournment leaves us the ability to reopen.
It is open.
It's open if you adjourn. We're just adjourning it to the 24th. Hold open to the 24th, whatever language you want there, but we're holding it to the
Okay.
24th. We have to be open public hearing in order to adopt the seeker finding.
Right, I get that.
Could it be placed on the agenda such that you could consider issuing a decision at the 24th? You're not bound by it, but just that you could consider it.
We can, as long as there's an action on the 24th, right, anything that's an adjournment is still open on the 24th. So, yes, this will appear again on the 24th, but we need a clean resolution. Want to make sure that we're clean on seeker. I want to make sure that we have a full understanding of, what we've got one photo showing one of these dormers somewhere. So, I need to see, elevationally how these things work. I mean, we're being
It
asked to
just looks-
consider specific.
It's 2 stories, that's all.
Yeah, I understand, but so I'm saying, so I'd like to see a little bit more in terms of, do you have a rear elevation with the dormer?
We do. It's a full-size set. We can certainly provide that.
Okay, so I want to see that. I mean, we have some cleanup work here to do. So there's a motion to adjourn to the 24th. There's a second. All in favor?
Aye.
The key thing here, right, is going to be understanding what the view shed from those dormers will be, okay? That's what we're gonna need to see in order to get this through on a vote, okay?
And again, the view shed is that you'll be looking across to another unit.
Yeah, I get it, but, where right now, that's not the case. Okay, that's what I'm saying. All right, thank you. There was a vote, there was a vote there kind of quietly, but I'll recall.
We
the vote.
voted.
Right. Touch that, we're good? Okay.
I would like to return the pictures, but I'm not sure.
That gentleman there. So procedurally, I just closed the public hearing. You could come back in a moment under public expression, okay? All right, all right, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, the next item on our agenda is public expression. I'm going to motion to open public expression at this time.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Jane, are you okay with skipping you for a moment on the list? Sir, you could reapproach. I do need you to restate your name and address again. Thank you.
Jim Bartley, 574 North Elka Creek Road. Real quickly, I don't know if it was 2 or 3 years ago, the site was up for sale, whatever, and they made the site shovel-ready. It was just like a field, okay? So when they made the site shovel-ready, they literally raised the elevation up about 2 feet. That's why we had such a major flooding problem in the deed-restricted area, which then went into our backyards, okay? So it's really impossible to look at the stuff up here and say, well, I don't see how you could possibly, we don't know. We really don't know, because the property is so much higher than the properties around it already before it's been built on. So really, someone's got to go up there at the height of the window and shoot a picture down or something. I don't know how that's done, but that you really can't tell by looking at what you have up here whether or not there's going to be a clear view of our inside our houses or our backyards.
I understand. Okay. The entirety of the resolution that was before this board changed today. So we now need to take some time to figure out
Sure.
how to
I appreciate
address the
that.
issue. Okay.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you. And I understand what you're saying. There's an elevational change on the base level. Okay, all right. There is a list. I think, Jane, I believe you're first on the list.
Jane Cox, Harlem Road. I'd like to comment on Resolution 2023-567 regarding the Main Street Corridor Plan Project for Main Street between Bailey Avenue and the I-290 that goes right through Eggertsville and Snyder. I did watch the video of this afternoon's meeting. I know you've already agreed to consent vote it, but there was no discussion. This would be the third study of Snyder that I can recall. Projects being discussed for Snyder. There's history there. I don't know what's been acted on, but apparently it's still ongoing. What you did agree to approve this afternoon says that stakeholders are to be consulted actively and actively participate. And at the bottom of the list of the stakeholders says neighborhood groups. So I assume that means everyone that lives in Snyder and Eggertsville will be allowed to comment on this project. But what I'd like you to do tonight, perhaps, is could you comment on this project, explain it to us, as far as what you hope to accomplish, what you're looking to do. I did read the plan, but I'd like a little more detail. Thank you.
Sure. The charter speaks pretty well for itself. So this is this is kind of born out of community requests for traffic impact analysis, pedestrian impact analysis, study of full circulation issues that are embedded all the way from 290 to what's the western border? Bailey Avenue, right? So we've heard continuously from people about there needing to be a road diet. We've heard continuously from people about cut-through traffic in that area. We know Harlem Road faces sizable backups at times. Obviously, the presence of the 290 interchanges at Main Street in Harlem create an awful lot of access management issues for New York State DOT. And Main Street is largely a corridor which the town doesn't have a ton of exercise control over. So a couple of years ago, we started a process of evaluating Niagara Falls Boulevard between the Willow Ridge and community in town of Tonawanda, and said that within that corridor from the 290 north to East Robinson or thereabouts, we had a considerable amount of vehicular and pedestrian access issues that we wanted to put together a study to deal with. I know about the Snyder Action Plan, preceded me, as did Eggertsville's. Those plans are still both ineffectively somewhere in the town realm of being there. Parts of them were adopted into a comprehensive plan back in 2000 or so, but a little bit stripped of some of their action items. So similar to the Willow Ridge process, where we saw an immense public access component to the plan that saw community charrettes and had community participation options, we decided to go back basically and say let's do that for the Main Street corridor. I think the Main Street corridor, I personally have feelings that in that area it is devolumed from what you see in Williamsville, and the corridor flows very aggressively speed-wise at times for a place that has multiple schools and multiple neighborhoods bordering it. At the same time, maybe artificially, because it was during COVID, we have tried out what that corridor would look like with lane restrictions and bike paths or bike shoulders, and it performed pretty well. Again, that was without a lot of the commuter volume traffic, maybe because the repave happened during COVID. Nevertheless, we think that there's a way to deal with Main Street and deal with some of the sub-Main Street issues. That's what we were able to get to, I think, a fairly, I don't want to say progressive, but I'll say aggressive plan with regards to Niagara Falls Boulevard. I think we're looking to emulate that process, even though I suspect the Boulevard and Main Street are going to be at different levels of service issues. So it's really looking to say, hey, let's take the Eggertsville action plan, the Snyder action plan, bring those up to current and do it with a focused way and intense public input methodology. Is that fair enough? Okay. All right, Michelle Lichtenthal.
Hello, Michelle Lichtenthal, 41 Pine Brook. So I'm a lifelong resident of the town of Amherst, former lifeguard for a decade. This is my first town board meeting. I'm also a longtime Verizon cell phone customer, and I've noticed over the past 6 months a pretty bad decline in service. So that is what I'd like to bring up tonight. This consists of dropped calls when I reach certain streets, neighborhoods, areas. I can pinpoint where I'm going to have trouble with the service, inability to make calls from my house, dropped calls in my own driveway. Although this has been an inconvenience for me personally, the problem is greater than that, as I have been a physician assistant at Roswell Park for 21 years, and I take call on weekends and go into the hospital to perform procedures on patients. I have literally had to leave my house, drive around until I can get good cell reception to communicate about patient care. I have reached out to Verizon. They are sending a cell extender to my house, which will hopefully help with reception, but this does not help around town. For the taxes I pay, I feel I should not have to be a prisoner in my home on the weekends I'm on call, nor should I have to be forced to change my cell phone carrier, but that is not even the answer. I have been informed that Spectrum also utilizes Verizon cell towers, so it's not isolated to Verizon alone. In addition, I am on the Nextdoor app. This is a problem that affects many cell phone carriers, not just Verizon and Spectrum. So I'm here tonight to inquire what the town of Amherst plans are regarding cell phone necessity. As the population and the number of new buildings is increasing, what is the plan to accommodate for declining cellular service in the town of Amherst?
So
I would like to address this, having sat at numerous meetings where proposals came forward from Verizon and other carriers, and your neighbors came and spoke against the towers. So now the supervisor can go from there, but for the last 5 years, they've been shot down by many of your neighbors because they haven't liked the locations or looking at them.
Okay, so what would it take?
So I'm going to interject for a moment. So I'm also a Verizon user. The town actually uses Verizon as our cellular network. So we know we have challenges, right? So you can imagine town provision. The town, it's not just Verizon, it's all cellular providers, right? And the town has a couple of different challenges. We actually have a dead zone in the northeast end of town where, frankly, we're lucky to get fire radio, fire coordination and service. So the town's doing two things. The first thing we're looking to build, we've looked at building our own towers and our own tower placements. Second, Councilwoman brought up some zoning challenges we've had. So we planned a couple years back to, along with Verizon and several other carriers, build towers on town parcels at our highway garage on North Forest, at a fire station in East Amherst, most recently at our sewer treatment plant, and have seen significant challenge to that because community facilities and rec zoning have requirements that don't meet the needs of those cellular services. Basically, they have need to be, our communications have a need to be at 180 feet clear. Theirs have need to be up in that same range in order to broadcast down to sub towers or subsurface or subcomponents. And frankly, part of the reason why we were considering a few weeks back a resolution that basically allowed the town to overt our own zoning practice on town land was to deal with the height and restrictions and setbacks of towers. That seemed to draw some public ire because of some miscommunications regarding the Westwood property. So now we're back to figuring out how to construct taller towers within the town of Amherst, preferably on town-owned land, that would basically meet or exceed our allowable height. So there still has to be an area exemption in zoning, but we also have now an opportunity to talk to Verizon about introducing more smaller 5G nodes. The town recently purchased all of our streetlights from National Grid. That includes poles in residential communities. Our hope is that we can get Verizon, who we're actively talking to about this, to locate smaller 5G neighborhood service banks on our poles. Does that make sense?
Except they have to negotiate with National Grid. I don't know if you realize
It
that.
still has a grid negotiation to it, but that's part of our next evolution. So we are talking to Verizon corporately. We are talking to T-Mobile corporately. We're talking to AT&T. Motorola is our service provider. They're not our cellular provider. They're our hardware provider for police. All of those things are being looked at. Congressman Higgins was able to help us with grant funding to study putting a tower in the northeast corner of town. Our feeling is that we can put towers in other town spaces and be able to help with that broadcast. So it's going to be a multi-year fix, but I can tell you there are moments where I could sit and my phone or my hotspot can't receive a signal within 4-block proximity to town hall, depending on time of day and usage.
So aware of it, on it, work in progress.
We
Yes.
are,
Okay.
yeah, we are working with Verizon leadership, and no doubt, it's not just like I say, it's not just a Verizon
Right,
problem.
right, aware of that, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else?
Hi, Lisa Dirtle, 92 Chateau Terrace. I am looking at your resolution, is it 567 Main Street Corridor Plan? And on the way here, I took a photo of the end of my street, Chateau Terrace at Main. I stood in the middle of the crosswalk as if I were riding a bike to the far left of the crosswalk. And I was aware of this problem as soon as they put the bump out in. But one of your goals and resolutions here in number 3, where you're trying to troubleshoot things and do traffic calming measures like the bump outs. I'm particularly bothered by the bump out because if you're using a walker or if you're riding a bike, your only solution is to wave out around the bump out into one of those 2 lanes of traffic headed south or not south, I'm sorry, headed west on Main Street to get to the curb cutout, even if you're in an electric scooter. I'm confused to the intent of those and what we're supposed to do when we're on the bike, on the electric scooter, or using the rollating walker.
So I can't speak to New York State DOT's design or their poor use or installation of bump outs. I can tell you bump outs can work well, but you need to consider a road diet and you need to either narrow the lanes or pass a buffer lane. So when Picture Main Street project happened in Williamsville, if you look at the bump outs in Williamsville, there's a space between the bump out and the edge of the parking lane. That
Yes.
buffer lane is specifically made so that bikes, those types of access points can happen. DOT, when they did west of the 290, they took the bump out all the way to the end of the lane, or to the start of the first drive lane. So they can work really well. You have to design them right. If we thought Main Street was designed correctly by New York State DOT, we would not have an agenda to consider full corridor analysis.
I just wanted you to keep that in mind and have everybody please consider that, because we have a lot of bike riders and electric scooters in the neighborhood.
Understood.
Thank you.
Yep. Anything further? See none, I'm going to move our closed public expression, return to the regular agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda, inclusive of that Route 5 corridor study. I'll ask our town clerk to please read the consent agenda.
Supervisor Copa, 1, 2. Councilmember Berger, 1. Town Attorney, 4, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Town Clerk, 1, 2, 3, 4. Building Maintenance, 1. Controller, 1, 2. Contract Compliance, 1, 2, 3. Economic Development, 1. Engineering, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Human Resources, 1, 2. Planning, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Police, 1, 2. Senior Services, 1. Sewer Plant, 16, 1, 2, 3. Youth and Recreation, 1, 2, 3. Communication, first one consent, second consent. Public Improvement Permits, 1 consent, 2 consent, 3 consent, and 4 consent. Thank you.
All right. Town Attorney 8 is recorded as. Nope. Hold on first. Oh, yep, you're right. So I'm going to motion the consent agenda first as it appears.
Second.
Next, on the question, Town Attorney 8 is actually a bond resolution and incorrectly listed here. So we're going to have to strike Town Attorney 8 and motion to amend the consent agenda to reflect that.
Second.
All in favor of the amendment? Aye. And I'll motion the original resolution as amended.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Next item on our agenda is Resolution 533, a Delwood Park Inclusive Field and Park Improvements Bond Resolution in the amount of $360,000. I'm going to first motion to adopt the seeker findings associated with the project.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And I will motion the project as it appears.
Second.
And I would ask our town clerk for a voice vote, please.
Supervisor Copa.
Yes.
Deputy Supervisor Buckeye.
Yes.
Councilmember Berger.
Yes.
Councilmember Lavin.
Yes.
And Councilmember Zuccalla.
Yes.
Next item on the agenda is Resolution 534, 2023 Police Department Vehicle Bond Resolution in the amount of $255,000. I'm going to motion to adopt the resolution as it appeared.
Second.
And I would ask our town clerk for a voice vote, please.
Supervisor Copa.
Yes.
Deputy Supervisor Buckeye.
Yes.
Councilmember Berger.
Yes.
Councilmember Lavin.
Yes.
And Councilmember Zuccalla.
Yes.
All right, Resolution 535 is Amherst Central Park Facilities Professional Services in the bond resolution amount of $248,000. Going to first motion to adopt the seeker findings associated with the project.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Next, I would motion the bond resolution as it appeared.
Second.
And on the question, I would ask our town clerk for a voice vote, please.
Supervisor Copa.
Yes.
Deputy Supervisor Buckeye.
Yes.
Councilmember Berger.
Yes.
Councilmember Lavin.
Yes.
And Councilmember Zuccalla.
Yes.
Resolution 537 is Building Maintenance and Facilities Equipment Bond Resolution in the amount of $117,000. I'm going to motion to adopt the resolution as it appeared.
Second.
And I would ask our town clerk for a voice vote, please.
Supervisor Copa.
Yes.
Deputy Supervisor Buckeye.
Yes.
Councilmember Berger.
Yes.
Councilmember Lavin.
Yes.
And Councilmember Zuccalla.
Yes.
Resolution 538 is the Amherst Central Park Clubhouse commissioning bond resolution in the amount of $100,000. I'm going to first motion to adopt the seeker findings associated with the project.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Next, I'm going to motion, or the original resolution as it appeared.
Second.
And I would ask our town clerk for a voice vote, please.
Supervisor Copa?
Yes.
Deputy Supervisor Buckeye?
Yes.
Councilmember Berger?
Yes.
Councilmember Lavin?
Yes.
And Councilmember Zakala?
Yes.
All right, Resolution 540 is the North Maple Road Extension and Improvements bond action amount of 3.25 million. I'm going to motion to adopt the seeker findings associated with the project first.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Next, I'm going to motion the resolution as it appeared.
Second.
And I would ask our town clerk for a voice vote, please.
Supervisor Copa?
Yes.
Deputy Supervisor Buckeye?
Yes.
Councilmember Berger?
Yes.
Councilmember Lavin?
Yes.
And Councilmember Zakala?
Yes.
Okay. So I think that brings us to suspension items, right?
Right.
So I'm going to motion to exit the agenda for the purposes of adopting one suspension item.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yes, we have a request from our town engineer entitled Donation of Natural Gas-Driven Motor Cooling Skid Hardware, Silencing Muffler and Appurtenances. Kindly adopt a resolution authorizing the donation of the above referenced equipment from the Eden Central School District to the town of Amherst Water Pollution Control Facility, and also authorize the supervisor to execute any agreement necessary to complete the transfer of said equipment. In working with our service provider, Siemens Industry, Inc., they have identified this potential donation as a means to further attenuate the noise profile of the natural gas-driven pump at the Water Pollution Control Facility, and I so move.
Second.
On the question, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. With that, I'll motion to return to regular agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion open in the second round of public expression.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Seeing none, I'm going to motion to close public expression.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And I'll motion to adjourn this evening's board meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks, everybody.
Yes.